Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Richmond Raceway redemption for Austin Dillon. Can they make anything out of that win? MotoGP, Marc Marquez, another Swede. Is that championship marked over? Joe Samaniego here, along with Tanner Smith, editor from the Pitbox Press, and Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com. Articles already up since the race was last night. Of course, across social media, you can find the grid ranking. Week 20 is already out. And a big thank you to all of our Patreon investors calling the show. Mark, David, Matthew, and Robin. Got the order a little mixed up, but got everyone calling the show. Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Wanted to thank them all. Last weekend, Nicole, myself, at Portland International Raceway. Couldn't have done without you all. And of course, all our super chat, buy me a coffee supporters that has helped us along the way. We'll be back in Portland a couple weeks from now for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Be interested to see if Connor Zillage is going to be able to potentially race, be back, and do what SVG did last year and get a win. SVG did in dominating fashion. One of the big things, Richmond Raceway, we didn't really see that first part of the race, a driver that we felt like was just going to dominate the full race. Some people were looking at Tyler Reddick, since he got a great start to that first stage, won the first stage. But overall, came down to the third and final stage, which went caution-free. And for Austin Dillon, it was deja vu, but thankfully not deja vu all over again with a late caution and overtime and mayhem. Austin Dillon goes out there and claims the Cookout 400 at Richmond Raceway. First win of the year, first top 5 of the year. And now he's in the playoffs, and he led over 100 laps. And the stat that just blew me away. First time the number 3 car has led over 100 laps in a race since the 1998 Daytona 500 when Dale Earnhardt Sr. went on to win that race. Of course, we know the number 3 was gone for a long time after the 2001 Daytona 500, but since it's been back with Austin Dillon, first time he has done this. Matt, starting with you, was this redemption for Austin Dillon? And can people now move on from that 2024 finish?
Yes and no. I think the stat too is crazy to think about, right? 100 lap and it was the exact, I believe, 107 laps was the same that Dale led in that 500. So I didn't exist yet, so keep in mind that's how long ago that was. Not really that long ago, but I just like to throw that. I still got a little bit of youth left in me, right? But yeah, it's hard to forget what he did in 2024, but I think it definitely makes up for it, and it's redemption. It's funny that it seems like RCR has like the one good setup for Richmond, and then the rest of the year, Austin Dillon's running like 25th or worse. But he deserves it. I mean, he didn't lead a race high. Bubba Wallace led the most laps, but he was arguably the best car all day long, and he finished 4th in both stages. 54 points for Austin Dillon, probably the most he's ever scored in a Cup race. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I highly doubt he's ever scored more than that, just because of how good he really did. And just, yeah, I think it is a redemption feeling for that team. You know, it's like after being, I can't say abysmal, but they were 28th in points a lot of this season. And we were even talking here on Grid Network. And I still feel that he would be, him and Ty specifically, once they take over RCR, which you think that would be the case, they are great. Like, they would be great recruiters. How do you think one of the best drivers of all time ended up at RCR with Kyle Busch? But now it's like Austin Dillon, I mean, he deserved it. He really, I can't say it was belt to butt, but in that final stage, it was kind of belt to butt. So congratulations to the whole RCR organization, especially Austin Dillon, his 6th Cup win. The only thing that shocks me is that he's done, I believe, let me just check the number here, 433 Cup races in his career, and he's never led over 100 laps until yesterday. That was more shocking than anything. I felt like somebody who has an Xfinity and a Truck Championship and over 5 wins at the Cup level that and been in Cup that long had never led over 100 laps. So congratulations
at the Cup level.
Yeah. That was crazy to me. But yeah, congratulations to them. I think it was definitely redemption. And if you want to read more about it, go to gridnetworktv.com. My story's up there.
So I don't think that there is anything that Austin Dillon can do to wipe away the stain that was last year's finish from his resume at all. But I do think that what he did last night in racing Ryan Blaney for the lead in that final run before the final set of green flag pit stops was probably some of the most impressive driving I have seen out of Austin Dillon since he entered the Cup Series or since he's been in NASCAR as a whole. He finally proved to me that he can cleanly race with the big boys, and that is something I have constantly castigated him for over the years in his entire 12-year career. So, in one regard, you definitely got to tip your cap to him and that 3-team. I mean, with this playoff format being as broken and goofy as it is, you can be good at one track and make the playoffs even after having an abysmal season. So, it's great that, he gets to auto-lock himself into the playoffs and knock out a Ford competitor. I mean, I'm sure Chevy's super happy about that. But I still feel like to some circles that this win is still a little bit overshadowed by some controversy. I felt that the 33 put on fresh tires towards the end. Granted, he did have a flat tire towards the end of the race, so there was a reason for him putting on fresh tires, but he zoomed by the 48 and then sat right in front of him. Very interesting how that works. The 88, an RCR-affiliated aligned car, also just hung outside Alex Bowman for 15 to 20 laps towards the end of the race. The 16 was also up there racing the second-place car really hard. So you do have to wonder, could Alex Bowman, with how much gap he was chewing into when he was running by himself, if he would have been able to make it up there if the lap cars had left him alone. But I still think at the end of the day, Austin Dillon had a career day. I think that he put together a really strong performance, and there wasn't a stupid caution at the end to completely take it out of his hands. So obviously a tip of the cap to RCR and the number 3 bunch. I think that hopefully they can, take some of this positive momentum and transfer it over to the 8 car. I think that Kyle Busch deserves a victory if we're going to keep handing Austin Dillon all the good setups. So, yeah, it's a little unfortunate that the driver for RCR that I think everybody else would love to see win is still languishing in the, teens and 20s every race weekend, while we give the owner's grandson a good setup to go win a race with. It just feels a little odd to me.
I really like what you said, Tanner, about it's not going to erase what happened in 2024. And I think that's something Austin Dillon, while he won't publicly say he regrets that move, how that all transpired, because we're racers. We got to go out there. You got to get the win. But definitely crossed the line. Not going to admit it. But I think this goes a long way in just reestablishing that, look, you give him a good car, a good opportunity to go out there, get that win, he could get the job done. What's going on with Richard Childress Racing? The fact that they're slumping, I mean, really nothing going on for this team up until the Richmond weekend. And as you mentioned, with Kyle Busch just struggling, not being there week in and week out, I feel this is just one of those race weekends where if it wasn't for this race weekend, I think, again, they would be going to Daytona, both of them, must-win situations, not in a great spot where they have to go out there, get a win, and then putting themselves in a situation of controversy of, okay, are you going to push somebody out of the way for the win? And with Austin Dillon, even his Daytona 500 win, we know how that happened with Aric Almirola. I think for Austin Dillon to get this win is to really show, look, I could do this behind the wheel. I just need that car to be perfect. I need the pit crew to do a good job. I mean, really, besides that last caution last year, the pit crew, that was their time to shine. it's just one of those deals where they have to be perfect week in and week out to beat some of these bigger teams. I think it just really shows the capability this team does have when everything goes right. They just have to put everything together. Because Richard Childress Racing, it has been a very interesting few weeks. Let's start with the Austin Dillon controversy at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That led to the controversial blue collar team comment by Richard Childress claiming that he's being picked on because they are a blue collar team, which a lot of folks I feel dispute that. Austin Hill was then suspended, comes back, his first statement, he didn't do anything wrong. Then he goes to Watkins Glen, there's the big crash. Kyle Busch, not a good night, especially with that big one. Chase Elliott comes out. People are talking about, did he rage quit? Is he back to 2008 Kyle Busch? What's going on? He's going to be at a must-win situation in Daytona. But for Austin Dillon, what he did, just clean race. We can't figure out what's going on with the 88 and the others and the 48. But for Austin Dillon's side, he put everything he needed to do out there and get that win. And one of the things I found interesting in the post-race press conference, he was talking about how at times him and his brother have butted heads with Richard Childress. Of course, that's difficult. It's their grandpa. But it seems like they recognize the team needs to do something drastic. We talked about on this show, Austin Dillon could be potentially a better role in team management. The fact he brought in Kyle Busch, managing the team going forward. Tanner, I know you said that, so I'll start with you on this one. Can Austin Dillon rally the RCR organization to close the season off strong and improve what has been a dismal 2025 leading up to Richmond?
Unless they can find their spy or whatever it was that was able to steal this setup from Joe Gibbs Racing last year, no, I'd say probably not. But I feel that RCR, outside of this one racetrack, doesn't show the speed necessary to compete for a title. And if Austin Dillon is your best hope to go win a title as an organization, and you think you're going to win a title, I think you've got another thing coming. I just feel that coming into this weekend, the 28th driver in points is going to get to race for a title over guys that have been in the top 10 all season long, like Chris Buescher, Alex Bowman, Tyler Reddick is even at threat to miss the playoffs now. I think that as far as this season is concerned, and as far as RCR is concerned, coming down the stretch here with the last 11 races, I mean, obviously winning yesterday is going to guarantee the 3 team a top 16 finish in points this year that I don't think they've earned. As far as Kyle Busch is concerned, though, I mean, what do you have to look forward to outside of Daytona? Like, I think ultimately if you're Kyle Busch, you just want to get back to victory lane no matter what. And I think a lot of people in the sport would love to see that at this point, especially now that we've had to see Austin Dillon, his teammate, win 2 times in the time that it's been since Kyle Busch last won a race, which, again, really insane to say. But I just feel that with the whole RCR team, they've been posturing more than they've done actual competing. I think that they live too far in the past, and I obviously don't think that anybody worth $250 million is certainly blue collar by any chance. So, yeah, I think that if RCR wants to, compete coming down the stretch, they need to, really get their ducks in a row and hope for other people to have worse luck than them. So, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot of faith in them coming into the playoffs, especially if it's going to be with the 3 team and the 3 team only.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what this. it's hard to say specifically. Like, you have to define it. What is a rally for RCR versus a rally for another team? Is a rally for RCR now finishing 15th instead of 16th in the playoff like standings, which is impressive. I mean, like I said, as much as we have trashed Austin Dillon and stuff like that, he really did deserve this victory, regardless of how they got the setup and stuff like that. He did it, and he still, to this day, I still think he was a more deserving victory in the sense than Harrison Burton's last year. And I think the playoff system and what it does kills the underdog victories. I think if this didn't guarantee a Austin Dillon playoff spot, I think we'd all be. I think people who watch NASCAR specifically in the playoffs and see a guy like Buescher, who's probably going to miss now, despite being incredible this season, I think it stains that. And then Harrison Burton's victory was absolutely incredible, and it took a little bit for it to really sink in, to be like, yeah, this was a great win. And what really makes people upset about it is the guy second to last or last in the full-time standings is now fighting for a playoff spot. So that's just that. But for them, it is interesting with Richard Childress Racing that they have 4 cars, 2 in Cup, full-time, 2 in Xfinity. And the one guy who has not won yet is arguably the greatest to ever do it, and that's Kyle Busch. And it's just 80-ish races now winless, while Austin Dillon has 2 wins at the same track. Is since Kyle Busch's last victory is really insane to me. I think they got a lot of talent, though, in the stable as well, with Jesse Love coming up through the ranks, regardless of what he did and the tires and everything, being in front of Bowman and stuff like that during the race. And then Austin Hill's got a lot of talent despite the mistakes that he makes. So I think you're going to have 3 of your 4 cars full-time across NASCAR making the playoffs, and only 2 of them I think can make a legitimate run. I don't think Austin Dillon will. But then you go back to that argument Tanner and I were talking about on the pre-race show. You really started, it's like a lot of people complained about Shane Van Gisbergen only being, I'm looking 24th in points, and then everyone was quiet about Josh Berry only being 4 points ahead of him at the time. But so who was more undeserving, right? But now you look, and Shane Van Gisbergen has 4 more points than Austin Dillon right now, which makes Austin Dillon technically the worst in the points that is now going to be a playoff driver. So I wonder if that narrative is going to switch over from Austin Dillon, or from Shane Van Gisbergen to Austin Dillon. But I think the whole thing about road courses and ovals is going to make that argument confusing for people. So, but yeah, I think I agree with a lot with what Tanner said as well. I don't know how if they're going to rally, but I think this is definitely a great positive momentum for this team. And then I think not the controversy, but the conversation that was like put in the, I guess, the media center, where Austin Dillon said that him and his brother kind of disagree with a lot of what Richard Childress has said and how the team is right. And I think we've said on the show, and I think we can all agree, Austin Dillon will be, in my opinion, a very good team. I can't say team principal, but, the head of the company. I think Austin Dillon is incredible with what he's able to do, obviously bringing the talent over like that. And it's interesting to see now that there's more disagreements behind the scenes than I think we realize about how this team is going. So I guess whatever happens, hopefully it can get Kyle Busch a victory sometime this soon, because I think everyone, even Kyle Busch haters, are now like, oh, well, now this kind of sucks that he hasn't won in 80-something races. But we'll see what happens.
The fact that we keep talking about Austin Dillon as he's ready to potentially lead the team, I think this is that opportunity where if he could somehow just get a little bit more from the team, it might be, as mentioned, okay, instead of being 16th, you're 15th. And maybe a few more top 15 finishes. They may not seem like little things, but if that team behind the scene could feel better, like, hey, we could get more, I think that could really go a long way in helping that team big picture, maybe for 2026 sake. Because as you said, the fact that Kyle Busch still winless, still is not doing anything really, was running in the top 10 until the big one occurred. I think they got a lot of pressure on that team too. We got to do something. And I think if what Austin Dillon said is true at the press conference. Seems like maybe him and his brother have an idea, and I can't imagine the struggle. Just it's one thing if you're a driver and you're saying this is what we need to do as a team, and the team owner is no, we've done it this way. This is how we do it. I mean, I think people think of what happened with Jack Roush back then, especially with Greg Biffle, as the team went from consistent championship contenders to where they are now. I can't imagine how much harder it is if that's your grandpa owning the team and saying, no, we've always done it this way, or this is how it works. It's going to be very interesting to see what Austin Dillon can do. This could be an opportunity for him to really show he is a lot more than just a race car driver that people compare to, like, say, a Cole Custer, a Lance Stroll, or others, where you're in there because of who's running the team. Is that true to a certain extent? Yes. But I think Austin Dillon could really prove he could do a lot more, especially behind the wheel. And it's going to be very interesting what that team can make of the next 11 race weekends. Of course, Daytona, Talladega, they probably have that circle. One of the things with all these races coming up, but the playoff picture coming down to the end has to be what's going on with Tyler Reddick and 2311. 2 spots are left unclaimed in the playoffs right now. Tyler Reddick, 29 points ahead of Alex Bowman. Bowman, 60 points ahead of Chris Buescher, who is below the cut line. Now, of course, 60 points to max. You throw in the Xfinity fastest lap, 61 points. Statistically, I think Bowman and Buescher can only tie, because if Bowman wants to finish dead last, he still is looking at 1 point, potentially more, depending on how many cars in that field. So Buescher's really in a must-win situation. Everyone essentially behind Buescher's in a must-win situation. And I got to say, when it comes down to this, Tyler Reddick will clinch a playoff position if he finished 10th or better at Daytona. That was according to Johnson Field from the Racing Expert. So 10th place or better, he got to make no matter what Alex Bowman does, including a race win, because then it will be Bowman and Reddick in. Matthew Reddick, he started that first stage looking really strong, gets the stage win until the crash. Of course, bent wheel, you're going to struggle, not have a good finish. You have Alex Bowman, second place finish. What would have happened if Jesse Love, Shane Van Gisbergen weren't exactly there? Hard to tell. Who's looking better entering Daytona? Are you looking at Tyler Reddick or Alex Bowman?
I think if you go off momentum base, one of the drivers has 1 top 10 in the last 5 races, and the other one has 2 top 5s and 2 top 10s. So 4 total top 10s in the last 5 races. And that one's Alex Bowman. And I think Alex Bowman has just gotten hot at the right time when he's needed to, in that sense. Remember his abysmal start where he was finishing like 28th or worse literally every single week, but he manages to somehow still be 9th in the standings. And then Reddick just seemed mentally defeated. I don't know what's going on. He's still, I'm looking at the driver's standings, he's still 7th in the standings, but it is possible if he has a bad day and Reddick or Bowman has a great day, and there's a new winner, that Reddick could be out of the playoff. I don't know if it's the charter thing anymore, because before all this slump that Reddick's been in, he had like 3 straight top 5 or top 10 finishes before that, when the NASCAR challenge, the in-season tournament challenge was going on. Reddick got hot, and he just hasn't won. And so it's just going to be one of those things for him where they've won on super speedway before. The team has in general too, including him. So I think they could do it. But Bowman's got more momentum, and I think for Alex Bowman as well, I think he's racing for more in the sense, because if he doesn't make the playoffs, nobody's going to care that he was 9th in the regular season standings. They're just going to kind of crap on him because he's the only Hendrick car that doesn't get in it. But I think Bowman has more than enough talent to prove he could be a number 1 or 2 driver on pretty much every other team. It just so happens to be he's with Hendrick Motorsports, who has 3 of the 5 best drivers currently in the sport in terms of the point standings. So I think Bowman Bowman's almost won at Daytona before, especially this year in the 500 where his teammate won. So I think Bowman's got that momentum, but I do want to touch on we would be having a completely different conversation if Chris Buescher didn't get that points penalty earlier this season where it was initially 60, but then it became 30. There would be a lot closer of a points battle fight between Reddick, Bowman, and Buescher right now. So Buescher would be at 655, which would move him just 30 points behind Bowman instead of 60 points behind Bowman. So it's kind of disappointing to see that one of these three guys, or maybe even two of them, so Buescher, Bowman, or Reddick, is not going to be in the playoffs. I think that's disappointing. Same with a guy like Ryan Preece, who's had a career year, probably not going to make it unless he wins. So yeah, Bowman's got more momentum than Tyler Reddick, but Tyler Reddick's another guy who he just randomly will get hot and he can perform. But he was definitely defeated after his comments with the whole Daniel Suarez, Ty Gibbs incident post race, and just 23-11 as a whole, going from one of the best races it seems like they were ever going to have, first time they've ever swept the stages, and then he gets spun out and then just goes from running in the average of like a top 5 place average to running 34th multiple laps down. So I'm going to go with Bowman.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Bowman, and here's why. So since Mexico City, which was 10 races ago, Tyler Reddick has finishes of 20th, 32nd, 4th, 3rd, 6th, 12th, 29th, 19th, 9th, and 34th. Meanwhile, in that same time span, Alex Bowman has finished 4th, 11th, 3rd, 8th, 19th, 3rd, 9th, 7th, 20th, and 2nd. So 2 finishes worse than 11th place for Alex Bowman in the last 10 races. I really don't think that what he's doing this season has truly been appreciated. I think I mentioned it in yesterday's show, or may have been our after show chat, Matthew, but Alex Bowman has been supremely consistent this year. He has put himself in, I believe, a tie for second now for most top 10s on the season, but because he doesn't have a win, that's just not a season of value in NASCAR's eyes. And it's really a shame, because I think that seasons like Bowman's should be held up and should be appreciated more than they are. I mean, to have, 14 top 10s through 25 races, that's really impressive. And it seems like most of the time when they're missing, at least recently, it's really not that terrible. You're still in the top 20. The last time they had like a truly bad run was at Michigan, where they got taken out completely out of their control. You obviously had Nashville and Charlotte before that, but I just feel like for the most part, this 48 team has put together a really, really solid season, and they're just not really getting the credit for it. Meanwhile, you look over at the 45 camp, and last year's regular season champions have just been out to lunch most of the year, it feels like. Like, I felt that yesterday was the very first instance, all 2025, that the 45 team has been a race-winning caliber car. And even then, I still don't think they were the best team in their own shop yesterday. So even if they did stay clean most of the race, I still feel like Bubba Wallace had a better car and was the better driver last night. I don't really know what's going on with Tyler Reddick this year. I don't really know what's going on with Billy Scott this year, but whatever they had last year is gone. And they really desperately need to get it back as the postseason looms. They've got a lot of strong tracks, too, coming up. I mean, Darlington is easily one of Reddick's best tracks. I feel like he could definitely have some success at somewhere like Gateway. Bristol, that's a whole other story. But, you look at the second round, too, New Hampshire. I believe he won a stage there last year and ran well for most of the race until the rain came out. You've got Kansas, where he's won before, and you've also got the Roval, where he's been very competitive in the past, has multiple top 5 finishes. And, obviously the round of 8 works out really well for him too. So you would have to think the 45 team, based on past performances, would be strong for this playoff slate coming up, assuming they can make it. But it's looking real dicey for them. And I feel like if Tyler Reddick and Billy Scott can't, get their bearings together before this postseason, they're going to be a very early exit and a very surprise early exit for 23XI Racing. And at the same time, I feel like Alex Bowman and his team with Blake Harris on the pit box, they are making all of their right moves at the right time, getting strong for the postseason. I mean, maybe, just maybe, if Alex Bowman ekes his way into the playoffs, maybe he could have a Tony Stewart 2005 or 2011 type of run. Where he goes out and just starts winning races out of nowhere because he's shown the pace to have. He's shown race winning pace at multiple points during the year and just hasn't been able to convert for one reason or another. And I finally feel like we're hitting that point in the season where Bowman should start to rise to the occasion and probably start getting a win or two. But hopefully for that 48 team, it won't be before it's too late.
One thing I find interesting, I know we said this very early on in the season, was would the lawsuit be a distraction for 23XI? Well, here we are now. We know it hasn't exactly been going their way as a team. Bubba Wallace did get that win at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Great race. Done everything he needed to do to get that win. Tyler Reddick. It just seems like that team, as you said, off to lunch, just missing, not having that race where they're just standing now like they're the team to beat. Who knows what would have happened had Ty Gibbs not been pushed and then hit Tyler Reddick. Could have been a very different night, but I'm starting to wonder if maybe we are seeing to where, at least for Tyler Reddick, maybe this is a little bit more of a distraction than, say, for Bubba Wallace, because we know each driver has to process a lot going on with sponsorship, commitments, all that, and we know Tyler Reddick, without that chart, he's technically a free agent. He could look at different teams. So I got a follow for you, Matt, and then we'll go to Tanner afterwards. Do you think now we are seeing where the off-track distraction of the lawsuit, the fact that he could look at other teams, the fact he's driving an open team, which don't think they're going to be at risk of not making the field anytime soon, but do you think all these are contributing to Tyler Reddick's season not being what we anticipated?
I mean, I can't speak for Reddick, but I'm sure it's somewhere intrusively in his head, maybe in the very back, because his teammate, Bo Wallace has been having arguably one of the best runs he's had in a couple of years, where he's won finishes in the top 10, was probably the best or second best car all race until his wheel fell off. Thankfully for that team, he luckily got right where Chase Briscoe's crew was, and they put the wheel back on for him. But yeah, for Reddick, I think Reddick's one of the best pure talents in the sport. I think, especially watching him in Xfinity in 2018, 2019, it's probably the most underrated season, I think, in NASCAR history, was what he was able to do in his Xfinity the second year he won the championship. And it reminds you a lot of what Connor Zilic has been doing, where it's like you can't get this guy out of the top 10 or top 5. He's just consistently there. But it could be something. I think Reddick's always been the number one. This is going to be an interesting point. I feel like Reddick's always been the best driver on his team since he's been full-time in Cup. And this year he still has more points than Bubba, but I think it's kind of speed and everything's kind of shifted a little bit away from him. And then obviously it's Riley Herbst is not in the conversation at all, which I don't know if that could be a factor, that they are a 3-car team now for the first time, and maybe losing all this money could possibly be getting to them. These are things obviously we don't know. And then they've been running a 4th car a lot with Corey Heim. Corey Heim, who won the Richmond truck race, was very quiet, very, I can't say abysmal, but he just was never really on TV unless he was getting lapped yesterday. So it's just the whole team just really, something might be going on. I don't know, but I feel like the positive momentum we've seen from Reddick at the start of the in-season challenge, and then that's kind of shifted over to Bubba after the Brickyard 400 victory, and then his consistently top 10 finishes. I feel like that's overshadowing that maybe there is something going on with the organization, but they're performing while the other team in the lawsuit, Front Row Motorsports, is just not performing at all. It seems like Gregson's in the 30s, I believe, in the points. Just want to confirm before I sound like a silly goose. Gregson's 31st. Todd Gilliland is 33rd. Todd Gilliland is 31st, and Zane Smith is 27th in the points. So that team, I think, is hurting them a lot more too. But we don't really expect top 10, top 15 performances out of them consistently as we do from Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick, especially Tyler Reddick. So, hey, it could be getting to them, Joe. I'm interested to hear what Tanner has to say about it, but it's one of those things I don't think we'll know until ultimately the end of the season when this charter thing is resolved. Maybe for NASCAR winning it, maybe for 2311 and Front Row winning it. I think that's going to be the most interesting thing over these next couple months.
I think that if the 45 team is suffering some sort of setback from the off-season or from the off-track lawsuit discussion, it's totally a mental thing on their part, because the 23 team clearly came into this season choosing to not think about it, and I feel like they have been the better team most of the year, which is part of why they have a win to this point and have contended for more wins. Like I was mentioning in our private chat here, I feel like this probably has more to do with Tyler Reddick and Billy Scott hitting their ceiling last season. What I mean by that is, they won multiple races. They, contended all season long, won the regular season title, made their way to the Final Four. They had a really great season. And I feel like they might be having, I wouldn't call it a floor season necessarily. I feel like they could be having an even worse year than they are, but I just feel like they haven't truly been competitive much of the season. And I have to wonder if that's because their partnership is fraying or something like that. Like, it just seems that they have been unable to extract the same speed out of this year's car than they were last year, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, considering that the 25 Camry XSE looks a lot like the 24 Camry XSE. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see, in the 30 for 30 that happens one of these days, where, we hear candid interviews from Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Billy Scott, and Charles DeNike, and Booty Barker, etc. I would love to hear what they ultimately were thinking and feeling during all of this time where, so much for their team is up in the air. But at the end of the day, I think that Tyler Reddick and 2311, they definitely have not had the same speed that they had last year. And like I said earlier on, like the 23, I think, has been the better team of that organization this year, even if they don't have the points to show for it. So I think that if you're 2311, I think adopting Bubba Wallace's mentality to everything would probably be beneficial to everybody there, because clearly he has only, grown stronger as the season's gone on. And I think that he is doing what great leaders do, which is, leading through adversity and leading by example. And I think that if Tyler Reddick is having some sort of mental block because of the lawsuit and, his uncertain future with the team, I think that he should probably take a note or two from his teammate and, try to adjust going forward.
Very insightful stuff from you both. I know it is one of those deals. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen the offseason, especially, I don't know if Tyler Reddick would be the driver to say, hey, there's a better opportunity with a team that has a charter. I'm going to make that move and then come back stronger. It's going to be a while till we find that out. Of course, One race left before we get into playoffs. 23-11. Man, the wheels came off the race yesterday, literally, with Tyler Reddick getting caught up in the crash. Bubba Wallace losing that wheel on pit road. Lost a ton of positions, and of course, stage 3 went caution free, which surprised me because stage 2 was very chaotic with the big one, multiple cautions, but that first stage was also caution free. And we saw a sold out crowd at Richmond. I think I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, first time in 17 years I heard that we had a sold out crowd in Richmond, which, considering this used to be a track with grandstands all around, a hot ticket, constant sellouts, it has come a long way. Looks like maybe finally they're starting to get things done. Of course, they're down to 1 race a year, no longer a 2 race per season. And we saw tire management again, the softer tires, 3 to 4 wide tire, taking care of your tires. Tanner, was this the best Richmond race with this car? And were you surprised by that sellout crowd?
Candidly speaking, Joe, I think this was the best race of the year and by far the best Richmond race we've seen with the next gen car, and probably the best Richmond race we've seen in over a decade. I feel like we've heard so many calls to put that sealer on the track to help enhance the racing, and I don't think that's necessary. I just think we need tires. I do not think that tires are going to be the one-size-fits-all, solve for every racetrack. And there are certain races that I do not want to see determined by a very soft tire that could be vulnerable to failure. I'm thinking of places like Indianapolis, Michigan, high-speed places where, as much as I would love to see a bit more tire fall off, I do not want to see tire failures and see somebody end up getting hurt, just because their tire went down, which could happen anyway with a, sturdy tire, and, things happen. But I think that in the name of safety, we should try to be cognizant of not having massive tire failures at high-speed racetracks. That said, at a place like Richmond, which is already known for its tire fall off and how aggressive it is, I think that this race definitely was a really good example as to what you're able to do with this next gen car if you give it a properly aggressive tire. And it was a phenomenal race. I think that, even when Ryan Blaney had like a 4-lap tire delta to Austin Dillon at the end of the race, at first he gained like 2 seconds in 7 laps, and then all of a sudden it just kind of plateaued. I think that had more to do with Ryan Blaney's car and his setup. And then you saw Alex Bowman just fly by Blaney, and then, looks like he was going to maybe catch Dillon, maybe had the time to do it, but ultimately got caught up in lap traffic and wasn't able to advance far enough. That said, I don't think passing was a problem by any stretch last night. I don't think that, the drivers that typically contend at this track, I don't think that they had any trouble getting up to the front and managing their equipment like they always do. I still think the people that were strong with, tire management, saving their equipment, those people still had success last night in some way, shape, or form. Whether it ended up in a good result or not is, an entirely different story, especially if you're talking about Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick. But yeah, I think that Richmond's race last night was easily one of the best of the year thus far. I think that NASCAR really needs to take a look into how this race came together. And I also think that as far as the sold-out crowd is concerned, that didn't surprise me at all. I think that when you lower a racetrack's dates down to 1, it kind of forces more urgency because you do not have the other opportunity to go see that track later in the year, like Richmond always had to this point. So I think if you're Richmond Raceway, now that Mexico City is confirmed off the calendar for next year, which was solidified by Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic last night on the teardown, I think if you're Richmond, like, why not try to vie for that second date? I mean, honestly, I would take 2 dates of this if it's going to, even put up like 90% of this race from last night. I think if we even get 90% of what we saw last night, I would be more than happy to give Richmond a second date, because last night proved that the action track, it's back.
Yeah, it's tough. Sorry, I've been checking my phone. I posted something about the car store, and Dale Jr. retweeted it, and now my phone keeps going off for some reason, which is kind of funny. So I apologize. But yeah, the Richmond race, like Tanner said, if we could see what we saw, at least 90% of it with the tire management, and then I think a big thing what my favorite thing about NASCAR, which it doesn't happen a lot, is these long green flag runs that turn into strategy is such an exciting thing. And I think that's what kept us on our feet for 400 laps. And I think with the polling and stuff that like Gluck does, this was one of the best races of the season. And I think a lot of the negativity, or the people who voted no, are probably just because of Austin Dillon. I really don't think you can find other negative things about it to the average fan. But yeah, it's hard to look back, because this is one of those races where not a lot of action in terms of cautions in the final stage, so you got to see these long runs, which was great, and the tire and stuff like that too. I don't know if we might jump the gun saying it's a second date. I feel like was it Michigan earlier this year was like a really good race, and then we were all kind of like, it makes you wonder that conversation. It's like, oh well, if there is any tracks with 2 dates, this could be one of them. And stuff like that. Because we used to say that about Kansas, and then we saw the last Kansas race, and we were like, okay, maybe one is okay. But in terms of that, I feel like Chicagoland would be the one to replace Mexico City, if anything, or if you count San Diego's race coming up. But for that, also the sold-out crowd I want to touch on. I think that's awesome. I really do. I think it is important, if you have 1 date, to sell out the crowd, regardless of how many seats you have or you've taken out over the years. Selling out is selling out. That's what marketing is. That's how you market it, by saying you sold out, regardless of how many seats you take out. But I think the fans got a real incredible show. They really did. And I don't know what could have made it better besides someone specific's favorite driver winning. I think there was everything you could have asked for. There was a big one, too, which was funny to see, because you don't really think of Richmond having a big one. But then you had on-track passing, you had navigating through lapped cars, a lapped car slowing the leader down, and then second place getting around him. So a lot of great things that we saw in this race. I don't know, I feel like I get more and more towards 1 date per track, except like a select few. And I think if you give Richmond 2 dates, I think we might end up seeing some sort of Kansas 2025 race, or even like Bristol, where it's just belt to butt the whole time, and it's just like, well, why did we even watch that? So it's just one of those things where we never know. It's very unpredictable of what could happen. But I don't know, maybe Richmond having just 1 day is better for them in the long run. Not financially, but in terms of the product. And I think the tire management is a big deal. And I think NASCAR has not used that tire. Like most other motorsports have different types of tires in a specific race. Well, NASCAR's only tried that a handful of times. But now you probably count on your fingers how many times NASCAR has used different types of tires, whether it's the option and the primary and stuff like that. But I think it really creates a lot of good racing, and maybe that's something they can consider moving forward, is using this specific tire more often, to where drivers who have better tire management skills will work out, while guys who don't, which we saw a couple of them, run their tires to the ground, flat tires, stuff like that. And then, it's weird that Austin Dillon is actually really good at managing his tires, but good for him. It's not really weird. He is a cup driver, and he's won a bunch of races, but it's like, at the same time, I don't know what you could complain about this past race. And I think there's been a lot of other Richmond races where people have complained, about what's going on the track, so on and so forth. But really, this was just a product of good short track racing. So, yeah.
It was a good short track race. I think I would agree with you on the idea that some races should just be down to one date. We have such a long season, 38 races. You have where, I mean, Kansas, another track where, oh, it's such great racing. It should have 2 dates. And it's like that first date, it did not seem there was a big turnout. And I think there's so few tracks that really 2 dates are warranted. If we get to the point where it's just, okay, each track's going to have 1 date, but they put in a lot of effort, fill out those seats, I think that's great. And especially with all the discussion about potential economic uncertainty going on globally, inflation, all this. A sellout crowd for NASCAR at Richmond, a track where last year you could definitely say it was not a sellout. This was really good to see. And I think the history Richmond has, even if it's just 1 race date a year, that is absolutely fine. To have 1 race date, but a good solid crowd and continue to stay on the track for such a long time to come. The strong crowd, as you mentioned, they saw it all, including that 12-car crash that took out Chase Elliott. First DNF of 2025. He had completed all but 1 lap this year, entering last night's race. The crash also involved his teammate William Byron, who still went on, finished, and claimed the 2025 regular season championship. So he gets 15 bonus playoff points for that achievement. That puts his total at 32 playoff points. Hamlin has 24, Larson 23, Shane Van Gisbergen 22. So when it comes to playoff points, those are your top 4 entering Daytona. Matt, in your opinion, can Byron be consistent enough to advance to the round of 8? So we're talking hypothetical, without a win, or does he need to step up his performances and start going for these wins more regularly?
I mean, I absolutely 100% think he can make the round of 8 or even the championship 4 just based on how he's performed in the playoffs. And I think, but this year it just seems a little different. He hasn't dominated, even though obviously this is his first regular season championship. It's felt like he hasn't dominated as much as he usually has when it comes to wins. And it's just because he got more consistent. And I found it really interesting that he clinched it with 1 race remaining with his teammate Chase Elliott, who has finished in the top 20 every race up until last week. And then, well, I guess if you count last week as Richmond, then the previous week at Watkins Glen. So it shows you can be consistent in the top 20, but if you're not scoring as many points like stage points, you're really not going to be up higher in the standings. And Chase Elliott's had a very quiet, in my opinion, very quiet second place in the standings run. And the same like Tyler Reddick being 7th at the point he was 5th a few weeks ago as well. Very, very quiet. But yeah, I think Byron, if he didn't win the regular season championship and got those 15 extra points, because looking at it, he did have 17. So he still would have been tied with Christopher Bell. So he's not really had a bad year, but now he goes to the top automatically. And I think that will help him a lot in the long run. I really do. I think it helped Reddick a lot last season too, and then hurt Kyle Larson, who was just 1 point away from getting that regular season title. So for that, I think playoff points are a lot more important than just the average fan might realize, especially like they could possibly help Shane Van Gisbergen make it into the next round, being 22 points ahead in a 3-race span over someone like maybe a Tyler Reddick, maybe an Alex Bowman, who Alex Bowman has 0 playoff points to this point. Reddick does have 2 now because he did win a stage. Well, now he's won 2 stages technically, but he did win one yesterday. But a 20-point gap could mean it could dwindle really quickly, like you saw with Reddick's huge lead on Bowman took a huge chunk that got cut out of it. But it could make or break your season by just finishing. Like if Shane Van Gisbergen, for example, who has 22 playoff points, to someone like Tyler Reddick has 2, gets in. And then if Reddick has a bad day, finishes 15th, but Van Gisbergen's like 20th or 21st, he's still within that range to still be ahead of him in the playoffs. So it's just one of those things. But I think Byron, has proven he can be consistent, and he's shown that he is probably one of the most consistent drivers in this sport. But when he does have bad runs, it's like he consistently has those bad runs. Like he'll finish in the top 10 multiple weeks in a row, but then if he finishes 25th, he'll finish 25th a couple weeks in a row, and then he'll go back to finishing in the top 5 again, contending for wins. So, I mean, I think he's earned it personally. I think he's had a quiet regular season championship run as well, considering guys like at the start, Denny Hamlin, who's missed a race, though, Christopher Bell have won 3 races apiece. Hamlin has 4 now, and Byron just doesn't have the same amount of wins, but when those guys wreck out, Byron's getting stage points and finishing in the top 5. So you got to do better when you have a great day, or when your rivals have a bad day, you got to have a good day, and I think Byron consistently does that. So I think he can make the round of 8. I'm not going to say easily, but I think he could. He's probably a threat for the championship 4. I would argue for it, but you never know. It could be he could have 3 DNFs the first 3 weeks of the playoffs, and all of a sudden, boom, he's out, which kind of sucks. That's how the system works. I think what we're going to see is Corey Haim's going to be a prime example in the Truck Series, how he has like 65 which is something absurd like that because he's won so many damn races. And then when he's not winning or when he doesn't get taken out, he'll finish 2nd or 3rd. So he's been really good winning stages. But I think that'll be a true telltale of the playoff system if Corey Haim does not win the championship. Just kind of shows how bad it really is in that sense. So Byron, ultimately, he could get eliminated round 1, or he can use those 15 extra points, or 32 total playoff points, and make his way to the championship 4. I don't know. We're going to have to see what happens. We'll have to revisit this conversation in come September, October, November.
So this might be a hot take, but this season of Cup Series competition has been kind of mid, to be completely honest. Like, at the top of the heap, I don't feel like anybody's truly consistent. In fact, Ryan Blaney last night was the first driver all season to string together 5 top 12 finishes in a row. Do you know how insane that is, that we haven't had anybody do that until the 25th race of the season? And it's the guy with 7 DNFs. Like, that is just genuinely wild to me that we have gone this far in the season and somebody can't string together 5 consecutive good races. Not even good races. A top 12, like, that's just a fine race. So, with that said, I mean, I think the round of 16 plays out well enough for Byron that he should advance, but we've also seen drivers like Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski last year completely fall out of the first round because they just couldn't string together 3 good races. And we have seen the 24 team have stretches of this season where they were not good for a prolonged period. Even then, they were still able to stay ahead of their competitors and mount a charge towards that regular season title, and I do think that'll keep them afloat through that first round. As far as the other guys with, a lot of playoff points, I mean, honestly, as long as Kyle Larson doesn't do what he did on lap 4 and then with 4 laps to go at Darlington this time around, I think he'll be okay. Denny Hamlin should be fine. I think Denny Hamlin is probably one of the only drivers I would consider a lock for the round of 8. I'm going to be honest, I don't see SVG advancing. That's still not enough points. I don't think that he will have I just don't think he'll have the pace at either Gateway, a track that he has never been to. Let's not forget that. SVG has never been to Gateway, never raced a car there. Trackhouse isn't, I wouldn't say that they're traditionally strong at Gateway by any stretch. So I think that race will be profoundly challenging for that 88 team. And then Bristol, which as we all saw earlier this year, he was having a mid-off with Cody Ware for last place and then wrecked both of them. I don't know, that first round really doesn't shape up well for him. And when you look at the playoff grid that we're going to likely have, let's say that we get a repeat winner next week. let's say hypothetically it's either Bubba Wallace or Ryan Blaney, two of the one-win drivers. That will put Bowman and Reddick in the playoffs, and then your hypothetical bottom four after that is, in my opinion, Austin Dillon, Josh Berry, who has been practically MIA since Kansas. This was his first top 10 since then. That was back in May, so it's been 3 months since Josh Berry got a top 10. And then I would say probably Austin Cindric, though I do think that first round shapes up well for him, so we could see an upset there. But I would say probably one of either Bowman or Reddick is going to fall out that round. And then I think it's going to be a surprise driver like SVG, or maybe even someone like, Chase Elliott, who has been known to have a very challenging first round before. So I think that if you're looking at the playoffs, you have to look at the schedule and see how those drivers perform at each track. So I wanted to, do my due diligence here about William Byron and see how well I think he might do in the round of 12, which I think he should be able to make it to. He has never scored a top 10 at New Hampshire, surprisingly. Does have two 11th place finishes and a 12th place finish, but also has 3 finishes outside the top 20. Not a banner circuit for him. Then you look at Kansas, where it's very much a mixed bag. It seems so in the next gen era, he has 4 finishes of 15th or worse, and then 3 top 6 finishes. So it really just depends on what 24 team shows up to Kansas in September. That'll really determine how well they fare going into the Roval, where Byron has had a bit of a mixed bag of success. In the next gen era, he has, a 16th place finish in 2022, and then a second, and then a third. But even then, I still feel like the Roval is just one of those tracks that can be extremely chaotic. I mean, we saw last year's regular season champion Tyler Reddick have a lot of trouble advancing out of that race last year when he got buried in the pack. So I think it's really anyone's guess how the 24 team is going to come out of there. But at the end of the day, I think that 32 playoff points is a solid cushion. I do think that they should try to enhance that in any way that they can, whether that be, staying out to get a playoff point at Darlington or Gateway, obviously at Bristol as well. They need to be padding that total as much as they can, and I think their best opportunity to do so is actually next week.
It's going to be fun to see how this playoff shakes up. And Daytona, that's going to be the wild card. We'll find out who will be the 16 drivers in the playoffs. If it's a repeat winner from this year, not a lot of change. But if it's somebody from outside the top 16, it could be a major shakeup and a lot of implications. And like you said, I mean, even 32 playoff points William Byron has. If he goes to Darlington and just crashes out first lap, that just pretty much evaporates right there. So anything can happen once the playoff starts, because we'll be following it all year long right here on the Grid Network. And of course, NASCAR, they were Saturday night. They'll be next Saturday night, Daytona. Earlier today, we had MotoGP, the only other event in the grid ranking. And here is the updated grid ranking. Marc Marquez earned his 9th win of 2025. Another sweep with the sprint race win. So he moved up to 2nd place, the only position to change in the top 10 this race weekend, one step closer to Alex Palou, who has led every race weekend since week 1 of the grid rank on the first Sunday of April. Looking outside, we are down to 12 remaining in contention for the grid ranking world championship. Chase Briscoe was eliminated, leaving the remaining 12. Alex Palou, Marc Marquez, Sebastian Ogier, Brock Feeney, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, Will Brown, Christopher Bell, William Byron, and Matthew Payne. Those 12 drivers are going to be looking at potentially trying to capitalize. Alex Palou only has 2 races left, 2 tracks he has not won at, but he's already won at 2 ovals this year. So it could be one of those situations where, depending on where he finished, where Mark Marquez, the NASCAR Supercars and World Rally drivers all finish, it's going to be very interesting to see how this grid ranking will shape up. With that said, we are at our 1 hour mark, so we're going to end the show with our shining moment. Encourage everyone share their shining moment in the chat room. Tanner, starting with you, what is your shining moment?
While I was really impressed last night with Daniel Suarez's performance, obviously top 5 in both stages and got home with a top 10 finish, was definitely carrying the flag for Trackhouse Racing last night. I want to flip it over to the Truck Series, personally. Corey Heim, I know that he has won 7 times this season and has probably gotten plenty of airtime on a number of programs, but I really cannot stress enough how talented that kid is. I mean, I thought last year we saw probably what was like peak performance out of him, but this year, I mean, obviously comes to Richmond, a track that, as you know, I was talking with some folks this week, he really hadn't had any level of success at this year, and up to this point in his career, I mean. And he comes into Richmond, puts it on the pole, and, you know, obviously we can talk all we want about what could have been with Ty Majeski, and God, what a terrible night for him. Corey Heim rose to the occasion and put the foot to the floor and put his foot on the neck of the entire Craftsman Truck Series. The guy is absolutely lights out, and the fact that he doesn't have a Cup Series ride to this point is absolutely insane. And, I mean, if you look at the schedule, I mean, I know 7 wins in, I believe it's been 16 races is impressive in itself. But, I mean, you look at races like Homestead, where his engine kept going out, he could have won that race. Martinsville, where he got taken out the next week while he was leading. Obviously, the truck race at Bristol, he was in contention for. Rockingham, where he ran out of gas. You look at Wilkesboro, where he got taken out. You look at Nashville, where he was in contention, but just wasn't as fast as Rajah Caruth at the end of that race. Was obviously very strong at Michigan. He was very strong at Pocono before having a flat tire on a restart. I mean, he could have won 13 or 14 of these things this season, and to say that is just genuinely insane. But I just feel that Corey Heim, what he's doing in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, is not getting nearly enough media attention this year. And I think it's one of the most impressive, like, wholesale campaigns we've ever seen from any driver at any level of the sport. To me, this is almost as impressive as Cale Yarborough's 1977 season, where he averaged a 4.5 average finish for the whole 30-race schedule. So, obviously, my one shining moment goes to the Truck Series shining star, Corey Heim.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Tanner in that sense. I'm not going to have to repeat everything he said because he hit the nail on the head with Corey Heim's honestly a generational talent, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is a Cup champion in the next 10, 15 years. Give him a little bit of time, right? His schedule next year will be interesting to see. Obviously, there's nothing confirmed about what he's doing, but I think we're all excited to see what Heim is doing next year. But yeah, that's probably one of my one shining moments as well. However, if we want to touch on the Cup Series and then MotoGP, I think Marc Marquez just belt to butt every single weekend. It's like truly incredible what we're seeing in MotoGP with him. I think in the last, was it 4? It's like 4 or 6 races and sprint races. There was like 222 points available, and he has scored all 222 of those points because he keeps winning. So, and then also it was the 1,000th race under the MotoGP banner that he won too. So that's pretty awesome for him and Red Bull in that sense too, at the Red Bull Ring, I should say. And then it's hard not to say Austin Dillon having the best race of probably his Cup Series career in 430 plus starts. Finally leads over 100 laps and finishes top 5 in both stages, and then wins surely on pace. Not at a super speedway spinning someone, not at a questionable caution at the end of a race, not at sending Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin, trying to send them to a different part of Virginia on the track. But he did it. So I really think that's one shining moment as well. It's just I can't say RCR as a whole because Kyle Busch was really fast in practice and then fell off the face of the earth. But I think Austin Dillon just being able to do what he did at Richmond is definitely a shining moment.
Two great shining moments. My shining moment also going to come from NASCAR as well too. And it's one of those deals where when you look at the season they've been having, Richard Childress Racing, the fact that they got this win, grant what you want to say, I can only imagine as a driver for Austin Dillon to go out there, get the win, has to feel like a lot of pressure is let off because he had all sorts of criticism after last year winning at Richmond the way he did. I know I was one of those people very vocal about what he did and how I even said if he can't race clean, if he couldn't, he shouldn't be on there. Well, he did everything right. And I think it really shows that there's a reason why he is a Truck Series champion, Xfinity Series champion. The only driver that could go out there potentially get all 3 championships. Is it an uphill battle? Yes. Am I going to put him as my championship Final Four? No. But what he did, I think, really shows that give him that good car, give him that perfect setup, give him a pit crew that could get the job done, things could work, and he can make the win. The fact that we had a race where tire management was a big key, and he went out there, took care of the tires better than anybody else, I think it really shows a lot of what potential he has. It's one of those deals where circumstances, the team, family dynamics, I think he gets a lot of criticism, a lot of pressure already put on him. What a way to go out there, get the win, and just overall go out there the remaining 11 races, try to put the best finish forward, maybe position the team for a better 2026. Now, Grid Encore. Ben and Brown, I think, are going to have a lot to say about the race weekend in Richmond. Overall, it's going to be a lot of fun to hear their thoughts. Wednesday, Grid Tonight. Any major news, they'll be reporting on it. Then we'll be back again, pre-race show for Daytona, the Coke 0400. Last regular season race. Plenty to talk about, plenty of mayhem, I bet you, following where we'll have the wrap-up show. And, of course, Week 21, the Grid Ranking. Don't forget, Week 21 at the Grid Endurance Performance Index on Grid Tonight this Wednesday and on GridNetworkTV.com. Already, Matthew Bro's article is up and published, so you can go check it out right there on Grid Network TV. For Matthew and Tanner, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.